Now we have 40 minutes for this panel discussion, and I invite you to think back over the morning. Jose, who doesn't have a name tag, we've lost it, but it's nonetheless very important that he's there. Johan, Javier, and Lutz. And we invite any of your questions. We have 2 microphones, I think. I have 1. And maybe there's a second at the back. There is. Thank you.
Xavier from France. I have a question for you, Lutz, and then maybe the others. So we spoke of the spiritual exercises and of a kind of communal way of doing exercises. And I really enjoyed what you said about the way you live in the common home. You care for the common home in a very practical way with this 1 hour of service for everybody every day. Could you develop what the fruit of that? What do you see as the fruit of this in the retreat at, I would say, spiritual level, if there is one? And 2, how do you organize it? Because 20 people during 1 hour, we don't know the house, we don't know how to do things. You need someone to organize the work.
During the first 2 days of any given retreat, there are 15 opportunities of instructions. So I live together with what we call a house community, a group of 4 to 5 volunteers who stay with us and work and pray in the house. They work for very little money. That's why you could call them virtual volunteers. And they gather all cleaning staff, all gardening staff, all kitchen staff at one special point during the first or second day and instruct them where to get the soap, where to find buckets, where to find cleaning materials, and how to organize things. So they are introduced to the places and to the locations where they find the material with which they have to work. So that is only on the first and second day. Then everybody is instructed and should be able to get his work done.
Any spiritual fruit?
The spiritual fruit. The contemplative exercises are administered in complete silence. That is, during Holy Mass we sing and pray together. We have a kind of listening circle every afternoon at 5 p.m. where people are invited to share with the group how they are doing with the exercises, not how they are doing with their personal spiritual process, but we distinguish between the external way of proceeding and the internal process, or the movements of the soul, movements of soul and heart. And for the first part, that is an open space in the group where people can communicate with the group and inside the group. So that is where they can actually speak. Now the fruit of the work is that it brings the group together, because everybody sees she's cleaning, he's cleaning. He's using a broom, she is using the washing machine. She is dealing with the dishwasher. He is to make things, how do you call it? To make things dry, to dry dishes or something. So it is the housekeeping work is a shared project, and it's visible. It's not done in secretion, as a mystery. in secret, because you can observe people doing their work. So it really, the retreat becomes a communal project, I would say.
So I have a question for you concerning what you shared with us with the chairperson, if I'm not mistaken. I think what you shared, the beginning of the church, the church was considered as kind of an abomination, and people are being refined from such practices, if I'm not mistaken, because I know when Christianity from church history entered Africa, there are some certain practices which people, like totemism, people are using it to conserve their land, some creatures. It was titled, you know, you're worshiping deities that are not true God. So based on that, what the Chayapas are proposing, or their tradition, are we going back to, are we going to readapt what they are doing, or is the church getting refined to see what is good in this tradition that helps in order to preserve our brothers and sisters, if I can put that in quotes, as in the natural environment? That's one. For Javier, the presentation you have on feeding, and yours on eating, if I'm not mistaken. I'm seeing from the presentation, please just clear me on this. Is there a way a vegan person, by the way of consuming, may be inordinate based on how he goes about or she goes about eating, the manner of eating and desiring? So it is about eating and desiring, even though it's vegan, it's recommended, it can be apostolic, but is there a way the desire can move the person from eating vegan food to, you know, to become inordinate?
Was it?
I am not sure if I have understood your question. Sorry. The point of your question.
The point is in terms of what is consumed, the quantity.
What calls?
The quantity the vegan consumes.
Yeah, we have. Okay, all right. We have to consider many things. One of the things that we have seen, una de las cosas, perdón, que hemos visto.
One of the things that we've seen these days is how complex everything is. So I think that the key here is awareness. Awareness, that's key. The key of the exercises, everything is an act of conscience and awareness, and at the same time this is divided into three: toward the divine, toward the human, and everything that you do with conscience, and you have these three aspects to account. That's the door to the kingdom, and if one of the three vertices misses, is lacking, that is the door to hell. I'll try to answer your question, because that will entail going back in time, back in history. So I'll try to summarize. The first evangelization arrives, and of course a first imposition of a way of being, then subsequently a series of revolutions inward occur, and the indigenous peoples, of course, are disgusted vis-a-vis the oppression they were receiving, and also some missionaries suffered that. So the peoples stayed on their own for 100 years only, but they had undergone this previous evangelization period. They did have the seeds of the word, so they did that, but then the conquerors arrived and they would, you know, destroy it all, so to speak. But then the seeds of the word stay and remain pre-Hispanic, as you were saying, and that can germinate with the posterior evangelization, Father Bartolome de las Casas, the Dominicans, trying to protect the language, the life, trying to protect the community, so following the same missionary model. But as I say, these 100 years, they were left alone with their own synthesis, and they had their principles. They didn't have the Eucharist, they didn't do the confession. They would continue with their own practices, and then they would go back to the teachings of the first missionaries. And then we have to wait until 1960, 60, 70 years maximum, and then the bishop comes back. It goes back, and in 1950, there were in the diocese 13, 15 priests, not more, and they would baptize, masses, so that they didn't go to hell. Well, that's the old ancient logics and the old theology. And when we arrived there were two groups. One that would appreciate the value of traditions as they were, and not the first superior, because the first superior had a different mindset, more integrist, I should call, we should follow the same path and forget about your own languages, and we are going to speak Spanish from now on, Castilian, Spanish, and that's it, and you need to follow. But the principles, before the priests arrived, so before we arrived, they asked the bishops to have the priests there, because there were other religions there going against their culture and trying to prevent them. The dance, for instance, we do our offering ceremonies to Mother Earth by dancing, and that needs to be appreciated. The first priests actually that arrived there were not that much into speaking to Mother Earth or doing offerings to the earth, but it was out of ignorance. It was out of our own ignorance, not appreciating the culture, not appreciating that the Spirit was speaking there, and we needed to hear. So we converted ourselves, and we served for a year as captain, as was mentioned before, offering. Well, I don't want to take any longer, but I hope I answered.
I agree with Javier that the question is more and more complex. I understood the importance of ecology, and I militated for it the last years on the level of recycling trashes, economy and electricity, water, other sources, make attention to the forests, to the other species, on the atmospheric layer, reduce the fossil energy, etc., etc. But when we come to the food, here is the point of my confusion and I'm lost. Do animals have rights? What rights, you said? I had small experiences with farms, so I don't really know what scientists could say about my experience. But I saw that hens, hens, okay, are producing eggs every day. And if there is no rooster, yeah, cocorico, all these eggs are useless unless eaten. If there is a rooster, almost 3 on 4 of the eggs are at least 3 or 4 of the eggs are useless. Sometimes there is a small hen in 1 egg on 10. I lived also in a farm with cows. At certain time, the little calf does not drink milk anymore, but you must extract the milk from the cow unless she's sick and she could die. In this case, what to do with the milk? Throw it? These ask questions on the idea of vegan. So let's go to the vegetarian. I saw also little calves. I even caresses them. Each calf was enough to fertilize at least 10 cows. In general, more than that. What to do with the other calves? If they stay alive, they will be useless and damaging the atmospheric layer by their gas emissions. So what to do with these calves? Thank you.
I'm not so sure what the question is in reality, because my experience of reality is completely different. In Germany, animals are grown by the thousands. So everything that survives birth will be bred and slaughtered. So many of your questions don't really arise. Because food production is enormous, and we have slaughterhouses that operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there is an enormous production of meat, of eggs, of poultry, everything. And my concern is, and Peter has really provided enough information about that the animals are kept under horrendous conditions. And they are fed with pharmaceutical products, with hormones, with all kinds of chemistry, so just to maintain the meat production. And this is my opposition. This is where I say Christian witness should be different.
Before I joined the society, I was agriculture, I learned farmer. A cow, normally before 200 years, they give 1,500 liter milk in a year. And a calf needs this more or less. Today, the record of a cow in a year is 30,000 liter. Not 1,500, 30,000 liter. So a human being moved on with the cows, and they give so much liter. Of course, a calf can't drink it. But what we changed the nature so strongly that the cows are not anymore cows, which they were before 100 years. And the same with where we are agriculture now. For example, I think it's in Qatar or somewhere, there are 10,000 cows in the desert, pure desert. So they took the water from the ground and they green the desert for 10,000 cows in the desert. Why we do need this? We don't need it. We do not have to do this.
Solo, también sí, un apunte solo.
Just one comment. We speak from moderation here. The technocratic paradigm has led consumerism and consumption to some limits that are just no longer natural. It's not natural. And we've touched upon so many different things here, but maybe the more spiritual side of the story and the more scientific side of things, you mentioned, for instance, dignity. The nervous system of the animal and ours It's only different at a matter of a degree. It's the same nervous system, but to a different degree. So suffering, we imply, is the same, but with this slight degree difference. So my point being, dignity should be the same in certain level so that they don't suffer. That's an ethical principle that maybe we could extract at a more spiritual level. I would never say that the animals that don't produce anything are useless or pointless and shouldn't exist. I don't know where exactly in Catalonia, I think that was. There's a farm for the recovery of animals, and there are cows there that have a broken leg, or some wounded animals, or sheep that get old, and that's not seen anywhere, probably because we don't treat them as brothers and sisters. So from spiritual perspective, when we feel that this communion, this Pachamama that you were referring to, everything is a manifestation of God for us. From this perspective, they are brothers and sisters, and that's the way we should treat them, not harming them, at least.
Buenos días. Sí.
Good morning. My question is for those of you who discussed food. I'm Alejandra from Bolivia, and I cannot refrain from asking because I'm a doctor, and it's not my specialty, but I have worked a lot on nutrition and health. I don't know if it's too daring as a question, but my question would be, to what extent is it necessary to introduce physiology, the science of the body, the knowledge of the body in a spiritual house? Because I understand that we leave the spiritual house to keep doing something in our daily life, be it a vegetarian or vegan diet. So the question is based on my professional experience as a doctor. For example, you've mentioned addictions. People are addicted to food, to specific components of food. So to what extent that can lead to frustration, anxiety, depression in those people who cannot stop eating specific food, and they need support. They need a more specialized medical support because there's a biological factor that has to do with the organism, with the brain, with the secretion of specific substances that are uplifting, just like a drug use or alcohol abuse. The same happens with food. Now, I'm sure that sick people will go to spirituality houses, and those who are sick are told that they are guilty because they do not eat properly and they are not orderly in their lives. But their sickness is a consequence of the system, because the system pushes us to consume food. The system makes us believe that we choose what we eat, but it's not true. So to what extent, I'm saying this because I've seen this in my surgery. Maybe we are blaming people. People feel guilt when they are sick due to their lifestyle. Food is only one dimension, but then we have stress, sleep patterns. It's much more complex, but here we are focusing on food. So to what extent, I'll give you a more specific example and I'll wrap up. This supplements the spiritual dimension. When you're hungry, you should not eat. That's not only spiritual in nature. Biologically, when you're hungry, a series of liver mechanisms kick off, and the body has to be prepared to receive that hunger. So the body needs that biological function, and the body cannot think about spending energy on digestion, thus eating. The body needs to focus on this biological response to hunger. So to what extent this should be the sole responsibility of doctors? I think that we need a holistic approach, because otherwise people will not heal. And I have the feeling, it's a doubt, it's a question, I'm not sure if this should be discussed and worked on in a spirituality center or house. Yeah, everything should be included in a spirituality house. Everything that has to do with our capacity in life. If we're talking about holistic and integral spirituality, what you just mentioned is very important. And a house that offers a vegan or vegetarian diet, well, they need to be aware of the choice that they offer, and they should be able to support those people in difficulty. And that's the responsibility of whatever is offered by the house, by the center. And as for spirituality, support and accompaniment are key. Of course, we don't want to trigger the opposite outcome. As we said, we need to step out of our comfort zone, and that's uncomfortable. But to go where? What's the destination, the purpose? Well, to better understand everything, what we eat. So yeah, we need to look into to what extent that is damaging or not. We should not be absolutist in nature, in any ideology, but of course, taking steps into specific direction, well, that's important. That's very important to do. But of course, bearing in mind what you just said, which is very important. Yes. I'm Joaninha from Brazil, from the Amazon team. All the presentations of this week, I'm very grateful to all the speakers and to the food that we've been served. But you made me feel in crisis, because if we are one with Mother Earth, what about the rights of plants? Only animals have rights?
Sí, solo vaya, no sé si alguien más quiere decir, pero cuando explicamos...
Just to try and respond to that. When we learn from ethics, I mean, we're talking about human beings, we're talking about animals and ecosystems at large. Of course, plants are included there. We know that in the Amazon forests, trees are emblematic of the home of its communities. So in that sense, I remember Chico Mendes, who was an advocate through non-violence of saving the Amazon forests. When we say holistic or integral, we haven't really dwelled on it, but animals are the first step, then would come plants. When you look into the underground of a forest, of course, there's a whole underground network. There's an exchange of nutrients, of energy, of synergies. That we overlook that as human beings, and this is the wisdom that native peoples have. And there's a lot to be learned from them. So thank you very much for the reminder. We're not here to preach vegetarianism or veganism. It's not an ideology. That's not what we're here to do. It would be a form of violence. And if it's a call to non-violence. So we will not turn a non-violent movement into a violent one. And the same goes for plants. The vegetarian desire or wish, because of course we need to feed ourselves, we do not feed from prana or sun. There are some spiritual beings that are very advanced in these processes, but we have violent emotions. We need to feed from matter to offset the spent energy. So the more spiritual process you conduct, well, there's a transfiguration of the body energy that feeds from whatever you have at hand. So vegetarianism, it's not that vegetarians are less violent than meat eaters, but supposedly the vegetarian diet is a path towards non-violence that will increase the sensitivity towards everything else. Plants too, because we have then austerity, the reverence for everything, and that includes plants, the plants that end up on your plate. So it's a gateway. In whatever conditions, we fully understand that in other contexts, Buddhism, for example, is extremely radical in this point. Tibetan Buddhism is not vegetarian because in the Himalaya, there are 6 months a year that everything is covered in white with snow. So they eat yak. So you need to adapt to the circumstances, to the context. It's a sensitivity that has different implementations. In the West, some people believe that that is the path towards non-violence and respect for Mother Earth. But in other contexts, it can be exactly the opposite. Well, taking as a premise the quantity, the right quantity as to the rules of organizing our eating, I think that they come very late in the weeks, between week 3 and 4. So you do not experience that. So pedagogically speaking, these are very wise and very useful rules, but they should be there from week 1. Is there any argument to justify that this comes up in week 3 or 4? There are arguments, but I don't want to hog the microphone. So it's that hinge, that border between week 3 and 4, from death to resurrection. So it's a place in which you plan for the 5th week, in a way, quote unquote, which will be the implementation in your daily life of what you need to do, which is exercise more in your work than in your words. So with this idea in mind, it's true that this could be included more at the beginning, but these are criteria to be applied to eating, but other areas. There's a colleague here in the province who has written about it and has published it online. So these are rules to organize the life that you will lead from now on, not only in terms of eating, and to start the 4th week by paving the way of your personal transformation.
Hello, it's Mark from the US. I've just been reflecting on, when we talk about diet, as was mentioned, it can be very emotional. It can bring up a lot of feelings. And so I've been reflecting on the role of the evil spirit on this particular topic. And I think it's a helpful exercise as directors to just anticipate and reflect on how would the evil spirit take advantage of this particular topic. And so I know when I teach agriculture and diet as part of a class, several weeks of a semester, it's always emotional, but a lot of students, especially young people, are really drawn towards, I need to change, which is a good thing. And I think being aware of our diet, awareness, that intention is of the good spirit, just like Catholic fasting has always been used in this way. But I also think of St. Ignatius and Manresa and hearing the voice saying, how can you keep this up for 70 years? A lot of students and people's mind go to, okay, I need to be vegetarian now for the rest of my life, and it's overwhelming. And so for me, it's a reminder of don't get ahead of yourself. I often really recommend, if you're serious about reducing your meat impact, start with 1 meal a week. That's, in a classroom setting. But so I also think of us directing people. Myself as a novice, I remember doing the 30-day exercises and thinking, okay, not even environmentally, but I want to not eat in between meals and maybe eat 2 meals a day and maybe fast 1 day a week. And I ended up getting myself into a spiral that my spiritual director helped me through. So maybe to the panel or anybody else, have you had experiences? Could you maybe give input of how you can anticipate the evil spirit's action and how we as directors can help our directees navigate that? Thank you.
Everything you turn into an ideology is an open gateway for the evil spirit. So that applies to vegetarianism and to veganism in the same way. As a director of a retreat house, I'm in charge of what happens in the kitchen of my house. And people come there for 10 days. Everybody can survive a vegan or vegetarian diet for 10 days. I'm not in charge of what they do afterwards. Obviously, I would love to see them embrace a vegetarian lifestyle, but that's up to their choice. That's up to their decision. And I mean, Ignatius himself is a great example. I mean, the things he did at Manresa, he forbade later on to his fellow Jesuits. So we don't have strict rules of fasting. The whole set which has been presented is in the art of moderation and in the art of weighing things and bringing them into okay, I like the word. So balance, thank you. So that things are balanced. And balancing things means to avoid extremes. And avoiding extremes is, I think, a good bulwark against the evil spirit.
Oh, it's me. Suzanne from the UK and Sweden. I am wondering if this really is about vegetarianism or veganism at all, these rules for eating. I'm saying that as somebody who is actually a vegetarian, but I don't think this is about being a vegetarian. That's my kind of thinking. To me, it seems that there's something here about the principle and foundation of living, of choosing what we're created for. You could read into that we're created to be vegetarians, but it seems to me that it's a lot more about being balanced than anything else, and that's, I think, what people have been saying already. And then you can be balanced meat eater, and you can be a balanced vegetarian, and you can be a balanced vegan. But you can also be an over-the-top vegan, and you can be an over-the-top vegetarian. So I'm just wondering if these rules are very much for actually going back to the PNF, and it's actually the whole spiritual exercises are about being that, living in that direction towards the greater glory of God.
The title of the rules are to be ordained in eating, ordained. And from there, each one takes his own conclusions. To be ordained. So to be, today perhaps we'll say to be conscious of what you're doing. It's about, to be ordained, it's about consciousness, no? So if we apply that, we'll be good. After, there are options, personal options, and could be central spiritual options too. And you choose if you go or you don't go. Also you can do. So.
I will ask the panel, is it time? Thank you. Sorry. There were several people. It's a very interesting topic, and people have lots of questions and comments. So thank you to the panel.